Hey guys, my name is xOctoManx and this is part 8 of my Diablo Style RPG tutorial series. In this part we are creating our first enemy, which will have also some attack range and some, well, let's say look range or radius. And when we are walking into that, the enemy is going to come over and is trying to attack us. When we are trying to leaving this one, he's going to follow up until he's seeing the last point of us. Or remembers the last point, of course. And when we are leaving this one, of course, he don't like to come over. And of course, he is trying to attack us, or actually place this attack animation is going to rotate around to just make sure he's going to be able to do so. So we're gonna do all the walking and stuff and so on now in this series. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is I want to prepare my enemy I want to use, be it a skeleton or be it any monster, or in my case my own asset called Marin, which is also purchasable in the Unity asset store. So if you like this one, feel free to go down in the description and buy it over there. So let's drag this one in. As you can see, Marin currently is zeroed out at the 0th position with 0 scale. So what I want to do at first, Marin has itself an animator component, but the problem is that Marin has some specific movement type, which means I need to make sure that I'm not moving Marin directly, because he has some kind of jumping animation in this case while he's moving around. And what I need to do is I want to create a new empty game object. I want to make sure that I zero this one out so I can see stuff better, and I want to make sure that Marin is part of that game object. I can also go in and name this one enemy, maybe underscore or something like that, Marin 01 or Marin whatever. So, or you can just name him Big Blob. Okay, so what you can see, the position is a little offset to the original one, so I zero this one out as well and take the main game object now and drag this one instead. What I want to make sure is that when I have pivot and local correctly set it up, the blue axis in here from our base game object is looking into the Marin's look rotation, basically. So the blue axis, which is the Z axis or Z axis, is going to be the forward axis. That's the most important thing in here. So Marin basically is set it up correctly for this one, so you don't have to worry about that. If you have any other 3D model which is not looking into the forward axis, make sure that you rotate it and make sure that you use another game object, as I just do in here, to keep track of the correct position and so on. Next one is, there might be some Marin controller which you already have, well, basically which is currently available in the Marin asset package. For you, you might have your own controller in this one, but what we can do is we can actually use that Marin controller and make sure that we use that. This setup in here is basically not really good, since it's just for, let's say, showcasing purposes for button presses and so on and so forth, so I don't care about that. What I need to do is I need to take care of the any state in here. And what I want to create, or what you might want to go in and create, is a transition from any state to attack 0, or in this case to your normal attack 1, as we already have done for the basic character in here. Of course, the transition here needs to be is fighting or attacking or whatever. Boolean, you just create one in this line under parameters and press on the plus. So from attack, or actually from any state to attack, we want to make sure that we are checking for fighting is going to be true. Of course, this one needs to be fighting is going to be equal to false. Okay, so then we have our walk animation, which means we need to transition when walking is going to be true, and we need to another transition, well, actually when idling is going to be true. So again, that's the same setup, or the basic setup as we have already created in our character, on our main character. Also make sure that your idle is, of course, the main state of our character. So what we want to make sure is that when we're pressing play, actually we want to see that this idle animation is going to run. If it is not, then the animator is not set it up correctly, or there might be something we haven't set correctly. Well, actually, we haven't set the Animator Controller directly to it, so I dragged the Marin controller now to my Animator component of my 3D model, basically. And now he should idle. Also, you can see there's a little line in here. This line just represents the forward axis, so you don't need to take care of this one. It's only seen when you have gizmos enabled. So when you don't like to see this, just disable the gizmos. Okay, so everything fine for this one for now. What we want to do is we want to create a script which is basically working for all enemies. We're gonna have several possibilities to do all of that, but for the sake of competition and for the moment about the NavMesh stuff in here, we want to create at first a basic script which is basically matching all other enemies as well, without any stats, without any stuff, and of course which is making sure that we're gonna have a lot of different components we're gonna need to navigate through the NavMesh, of course, and of course to check collisions and so on and so forth. So that's what we're gonna do at first. I go into my scripts folder and create a new one, a new C# script, and I call this one enemy behavior. What you might want to do is you want to wait with dragging, because we want to do one step before we actually drag this one to our enemy, just so that I'm able to show you what's happening when we're doing so. In this case, we want to prepare the script like that is automatically adding all required components to our game object, in this case to our enemy. What we actually need is 3 different required components to add automatically when we are dragging this script onto our game object, onto our enemy. So what we do is we type in square brackets. I'm gonna zoom in a bit so you can see stuff better. Required component. And what we can do with that is we can actually pass in any, let's say, available or script-wise available component onto any type of game object. So in open close parentheses we can type in type of, and another pair of open close parentheses. Inside of that we can pass in any required component we want to have inside. So the first one is going to be, maybe depending on the size of your character, maybe a capsule collider. If you're using 2D stuff, of course you can go in and use 2D colliders as well. So what that means is it will now automatically add a capsule collider when we're dragging this script directly on our game object. We can do that with several other ones as well. So depending on how many we need. The next one is going to be another required component, in parentheses, type of, another pair of parentheses behind that. What we want to have is, of course, or actually I believe so, a rigid body component. The next one is going to be, of course, another required component, in parentheses, type of, and in another pair of parentheses we're gonna type in NavMesh agent. The problem is that a NavMesh agent is not available for us. When we are typing this one in, you can see NavMesh agent is not available in the list. What we can do is when we're typing this one with a big N, big M and a big A, we can right click and press on resolve. So we can automatically add using Unity Engine.ai, which is needed for all NavMesh agent or NavMesh components in total. We're gonna go to our main character now, or the main object of our enemy Marin, and we're gonna drag the enemy behavior directly on it. What you can see, it automatically adds the NavMesh agent, the rigid body component, and the capsule collider. And that's pretty cool, since we don't have to do much now anymore. We don't need to drag all the components we're gonna need by hand onto this game object. We can just pass in any we want and any we need. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to set them up pretty quick. If you remember correctly from the video where we are setting up this one, we're gonna have a NavMesh offset of -0.08, and I want to implement this one for our NavMesh agent on the Marin as well. Otherwise it's slightly floating, not in the air. So we're gonna need to go in and say -0.08, so it's automatically going down to the true 0 axis in here, or through the true ground actually. So the shadows are looking correctly, and basically it's not floating or flying in the air and it's looking awful or something like this. Marin is going to be rather a slow one, I believe. Maybe we are starting with a speed of 2, or maybe later on we're gonna do that by code no matter what. The angular speed is going to be something very high once again, maybe about 250 might be good as well, and a fast acceleration. If you're not sure what the best way is, of course go in and try this one out, or check what your old player setups have been, which means when we are going to this nav mesh agent, you can see we're gonna have an angular speed of 700 and an acceleration speed of 20, which should be pretty fine for Marin as well. We don't what we want to have is maybe a stopping distance of 1 or maybe 1 point something, so we're not going directly onto the, or trying to go onto the feet of our character, or our player character in this case, but we want to stop in front of it. So when we are selecting this, or when we have him or her as a target, then we don't want to try to go to its feet or his or her feet, but we want to stop maybe somewhere well close to it, but not too close. And let's try 1 as a stopping distance. Auto braking is pretty cool for this. And we can now also go in and change the height of this one. I believe he's about 0.6 high, maybe more, maybe less, and the radius of this agent needs to be a bit lower or smaller maybe. I'm not 100% sure how big he was, so well, but I believe something like that. If it's a bit bigger or smaller, well, actually it doesn't really matter. It's better, well, actually this just means how close we can go around the corners. So if you want to have some space in between the corner, you can always go in and increase the radius of this obstacle avoidance. And here quality is going to be high quality, priority is everything else can be as it is. And that's basically everything for the nav mesh agent now. Now we can close this one and go to the rigid body part. I don't want to use gravity, so I disable this one, and what I can actually use is kinematic. It doesn't really matter if it is, I believe so, kinematic, but we don't use physics in this case, or not directly, so it's not falling down or going up somewhere, or I don't know. Well, not at the moment actually, because we're gonna do everything about that inside the animations itself. Okay, so now for the capsule collider, I want to decrease the radius a bit, and what you can see, there will be automatically a slight offset since the X has been changed. While I was dragging around the radius in here, I can also go in and lift this one up. If I'm unhappy with the current one, and lift this one up in here, this one in there, and basically that's, well, everything we need for the capsule collider. Gonna leave a little space or offset in here as well, and even that is not important, or not that much. And what we also can do is we can make sure that this one is basically a trigger, or a, well, not a trigger, so a collider, which is it currently, but usually we're gonna trigger things, so we might change this one to be a trigger instead of a collider. But for now we're gonna keep this as it is. And what we can now do is, of course, we can save our scene, since we have done a lot onto the enemy as well. Also, you might want to go into your prefabs folder and create already a prefab of Marin, so the setup is currently set it up correctly. If you're using Marin in the future, make sure you have a well decent size. He's coming quite small, so you might want to go into the scale of the 3D model itself, and well, actually bump this up a little bit. I currently have a scale factor of 2, since he's, well, originally pretty small, about 30 centimeters or something like this. That's why I just doubled the scale factor, which means he's now about 60 high, 60 centimeters now. Okay, so pretty cool for this. What we now want to do is, of course, we want to go into our enemy behavior script and start to create all the movement and all the things we're gonna need for our Marin. So what we need to do is, of course, we need to implement all the needed variables for our setup in here, for our all our enemies basically. So at first, everything about the NavMesh agent. So the first thing is, of course, the NavMesh agent itself. It's going to be private NavMesh agent with a small n. We can also name this one just agent, or I just call this one NavMesh agent with a small n in the beginning. The next one is we're gonna need a connection to the animator component directly on our character, which will be just called anim. And we're gonna need a private bool, as we already have done with our ult or with our main character, of type or with the name walking, which is basically not just determining if we are currently walking or not. So the next one is we need something about our look range and attack range. So everything about radius. So the first radius is basically our look radius. We're gonna make this one public since we want to have access from outside. We want to change this one directly in the inspector. So our look radius. If you don't like the name radius, just use look range or something like this. So the next one is another public one of type float, and this is going to be our attack radius. Okay, the next one is everything about attacks. So I'm gonna comment this one out as well. Attack. So what we're gonna have is a private float, and I call this one next attack. We might want to go in, or we might maybe go in and change this one later on. And we're gonna have another public one in here, which we want to have access again from outside, basically from the inspector, which is called attack rate. And we can actually set this one to maybe to 1.0f or 1f, which means it's just 1 second long. Okay, and the last thing is we need a connection to our current player, which is our main character in this particular case, which is basically our target. So the target is going to be of type transform, and we can just call this one maybe target or target player or whatever you want. Okay, that's what we need, at least for the moment. What we now want to do is we want to initialize all the needed components. That means we want to get the NavMesh agent, the animator, and of course we want to get the target player. So what we say is we're gonna start with the animator in this case. Anim is going to be equal to, what we want to do is we want to get the component, and the animator component is sitting in children. So since it's not on my main game object, but in a children, I want to get this one from get component in children, and the type in this triangle brackets is going to be of type animator. Okay, open close parentheses behind the triangle brackets and close the line with a semicolon. The next one is, oh, by the way, get component is needed if you have the animator component directly on your main, on your main character basically. So the next one is our NavMesh agent with a small n, which is the variable name from here, is going to be equal to, and now we just go and get the component of type NavMesh agent with a big N, open close parentheses behind the triangle brackets, and well, that's basically it. And we of course need our target player, and we need to get our player from a specific game object. We're gonna talk about that, well, in a bit. I will tell you what to do and why that is well, a bit different. We could basically go in and say game object.find and try to find the player in our, well, maybe monster big scene, but that could be not so cool and maybe troublesome, since it can take a while until it's found. Even if it's fast, maybe it's not optimal to do that with game object.find. Instead, we later go in and create a little helper script for this one on our game manager, for example, which is holding the information of the player itself, or the game, the player object, which we can also go in and fill in automatically later on when we are, for example, entering a scene or leaving a scene, and so on and so forth. So we're gonna not hold the data the complete time inside our enemy behavior, and we are not distracting the scene itself with I don't know how many game object.find thingies. Okay, now let's go into our update function, where we want to set up all our bools and stuff according to whatever we are currently doing, or in this case what the enemy is going to be doing or going to do. So at first, what we want to make sure is that we're gonna set a bool depending on if we are walking or not, or the enemy in this case. So we're gonna say anim.setBool, open close parentheses, and in quotes we say walking. The walking is once again the keyword which is set it up in the animator. Okay, so what we want to do is, of course, we want to set is walking is going to be equal to whatever walking is. So we don't set this one to true or false by hand the whole time, back and forth, back and forth. Instead, we just set it whatever the bool in here is. So we just control that bool, and the rest is going to be done by this one line of code. So what we want to do is we want to measure or see if we are walking or not. We have two possibilities to do so, I believe. So if we are not walking, of course we are idling. So we say anim.setBool, open close parentheses, and inside quotes we say idling, comma, and we want to set this one to true, so the opposite to be whatever walking currently is. And of course we're gonna have an else statement, since we also have another state where we are not walking. So we want to set the idle bool in this case to be false. So yeah, idling is going to be false, or once again the same whatever walking is not at that time. Yeah, and that's basically everything. What we now want to do is we want to find our target and move to the target whenever we have found it. And finding it means, well, when it is in our look range. To do so, we can easily create a float which is measuring the distance between our player and of course ourselves, but also we can determine if the player is inside our look radius or not at the same time when we are just requesting that. So we can create a new function for this one. We can also put in everything in the update function. Well, it's up to you how you want to do that. Well, we're gonna have to do that almost the whole time, I believe so. Okay, so we call this one, that new float is going to be called distance, and the distance is going to be vector3.distance, and what we want to measure is the distance between our own position and the target position. So we say transform.position, comma, and now we want to have our target player.position. We're gonna need to set this one to be to position because target player is of type transform, not of vector3. That's why you need to have .position in the very end. Okay, so now we need to, or now we know the distance. Now we want to do something with the distance, and what we want to say is if the distance is smaller or equal to our look radius. So if distance is going to be smaller or equal to our look radius, then we want to do something. What we want to do is we want to move to the player or the target, and of course we want to attack it. The attacking basically is going to be the same or in the same statement or in the same functionality we're gonna create in just a second. Also, what we want to do is we want to set up walking to be true or false according to if our nav mesh agent has a destination or not, and if the path is going to be or has some remaining distance or not. We can do that on different possible ways, I believe. I make a note pretty quick. Update walking. So we're gonna do that in a moment. What we want to do now is at first we create a new function which is actually called MoveAttack, as we already have done that for our player. So move, it's of type void since we don't return anything. Move and attack. Open close parentheses, we don't need any arguments for this one. So we're gonna keep that pair of parentheses empty. So what we want to do is at first we want to set our nav mesh agent dot destination. It's going to be equal to the target player dot position in this case. This is going to be of type vector3 once again. We need to do that, otherwise it's not working. Now what we want to test is if the nav mesh agent has no path pending. So if not nav mesh agent dot path pending, So is a pass in a process or is it not? If it's not, then we want to also check, so end, if the remaining distance is higher than the attack radius. So navmesh agent dot remaining distance is bigger than our attack radius. Then of course we want to do something, and in this case what we want to do is we want to set up walking, which means we want to set walking to be true. In this case also we need to say to our navmesh agent dot is stopped is going to be equal to false. Because it's not stopped, we're gonna move that and we're gonna set up walking is going to be equal to be true. Okay, that's fine for now, but what we also want to know is if the radius, or actually the distance, the remaining distance, is smaller or equal to the attack radius. That's the vice versa actually for our next else if statement. So I'm gonna copy the first line and here say else, and I'll paste this one in here, else smaller or equal the attack radius. The rest is going to stay the same. Well, what we want to do is, of course, we want to attack our player. So attack at that point. Here we just want to move closer, and that's basically it. And when we are attacking, we're gonna have several states we need to take care of. So the first one is our animator. So we're gonna set our, or reset our animator set bool to fighting. That's going to be equal to false. Also, what we want to make sure is that we are looking to our target. So transform.lookAt, and what is our target? Basically our target player, of course, and pass this one in. It's of type transform, so we can actually pass this one directly inside of that. Okay, so the next one is we want to make our, or create our little attack delay. So we gonna create a little if statement for this one. So if time dot time is greater than our next attack, which is at the moment just 0, actually at start is going to be 0, automatically filled in. We don't care about that since it's automatically updating. In this next line, that means our next attack is going to be equal to time dot time plus our attack rate. So the next attack is going to be happening when a specific time currently is, plus our current attack rate. So when we have an attack rate of 2, we're gonna add 2 more seconds to the current, well, time actually, and this is the next attack where, or when we are performing the next attack basically. And of course what we want to do is we want to do damage later on, I believe, at that point. But for now we're gonna set our anim dot, and now we're gonna set the bool for fighting back once again to true. So in quotes, fighting, comma true. And what we want to do is, of course, we want to stop to walk around with our navmesh agent. In this particular case, we're gonna say navmesh agent dot is stopped is going to be equal to true. So we now say, okay, yes, we stopped the navmesh agent, and we're gonna set walking to be false. So we are not walking anymore. This is only happening, of course, when we are close enough, so in our attack radius. So we need to take care of that this one is, well, big enough or small enough according to whatever the specific character, for example, needs as a attack range. Okay, so what I want to do also is I want to create a little helper function for us, so we can see that little circles you may have remembered or you may have seen in the beginning, where we can actually visualize the attack radius and the look radius inside the inspector when we are enabling gizmos. And what we want to do is, for this one, we're gonna use some little, let's say, editor scripting for this one. It's a Unity provided function called onDrawGizmos. And this function is basically has a possibility to do things inside the inspector or inside the editor without being in play mode. And that's what we're gonna need, or what we're gonna use in here. Make sure you're gonna type this one correctly, otherwise it's not working. So, but instead of drawing gizmos directly, like gizmos.draw whatever, we don't want to do, or I don't want to use a gizmo, since gizmo only have wire spheres, wire cubes, and, well, normal cubes and normal. So nothing special at all. We can reform them, but they are not, well, looking good. Instead, I want to use handles. So handles are just different possibilities to draw things, but as you can see, handles is not in my is not found in here. What we need to do is we need to resolve handles, and we can only use them when we are using the namespace using Unity Editor. Once again, it's, well, basically a type of editor scripting. Now we're gonna have access to all the handles we're gonna be able to use. So first one is I want to tint my first circle. I'm gonna set this one maybe to white, yellow, green, whatever. In my case, I say color dot, let's say yellow. Okay, you can also use color 32 if you want to have specific colors, but the main colors should be more than enough. What we want to do now is we want to draw a circle. In this case, it's called a wire arc. So we're gonna draw wire arc. This wire arc is basically nothing else than just the circle which you have seen in the beginning. So, and the information we need inside that wire arc is at first, what is the center? The center is basically our transform.position. But the problem is it might be directly on the ground and we are not able to see it. So I lift this one up by 0.02, for example, in the y-axis, or 0.2. So I say plus new vector 3. And what I want to do is I want to set 0, 0.2f, 0. Okay. So I lift this one up in the y-axis by 0.2f. Then we say comma. The next one is it wants to know the normal axis. The normal axis for me is transform.up. It should be up for you as well. Then the next one is where do we want to start? So what's the vector we are starting our circle to paint from? We can paint this from a specific vector, whatever we want. In this case, I'm gonna use the transform.right. Okay, so transform.right is going to be my start. So where do I start the circle to draw from? The next one is I want to have an angle, and since I want to have a full circle, I want to have an angle of 360. I can just write in 360 degrees, comma, and now we're gonna have our float radius, and the radius in my case is going to be the look radius. Okay, and that's pretty cool since we now can see this directly in the inspector. What is the correct number for the radius? We don't have to type test or try around all that weird things later on. But what I also want to do is I want to have an attack circle. So I'm gonna tint this one into red. And instead of look radius, I'm gonna choose the attack radius. Don't forget to save the script and let's go back. A look radius of 0 is not painting anything, but let's assume we're gonna have a look radius of 4. You can see instantly we're gonna draw a yellow circle now. You can disable and enable this one in the game scene as well by just enabling and disabling the gizmos. And of course we're gonna do the same for our attack radius. We're gonna say maybe 1 point, well no, let's put in maybe 2. Again, this radius needs to be tested by you according to how far you want this guy to be away. Maybe 1.5 is more like that what we need. The attack rate currently is set it up to 1 as we have done this one in the base. And that should be it. So we're gonna apply all the changes to our prefab. I'm gonna drag that guy a little bit away so we can see stuff better. I enable gizmos and let's see if we are going good so far or if we're gonna get any problems. Oh, we forgot something. We don't have our target set it up for our player, and that is what we're gonna need to do pretty quick now, and then we can continue with the rest. To get our player listed correctly inside our game controller later on, which we basically take for to any position in the game, I believe, because there will always be the same stuff on it because of the cursor manager and the level up system and so on and so forth. We're gonna add a new script to that particular controller. So I create a new C# script and I call this one just player, well, maybe manager or anything like that. What we need to do is at first we need to make player manager static. That means we're gonna say public static player manager, and we're gonna give it an instance name, just instance, and then void awake open close parentheses. We're gonna type in instance equals this, so we make sure that this is the only instance of this one. Well, basically not the only one, but the current one. What we're gonna do with that is we can actually go and directly speak to whatever in here, or we can go and request things and get information from that without having the direct connection to the player manager itself. So what we want to have is a public, well, just for the moment, later on we might go and change this one, a game object, and this is going to be just our player. Later on we fill in our player automatically. For example, when we are spawning a new character because we have died, for example, we're gonna put in our player automatically with a function. But for now we don't have dying, so we don't care about this at the moment, and we don't fill in the data automatically at the moment. But we want to make sure that player manager has access to our player. We can also use a protected functionality for this one, but at the moment we don't need that as well. So once the compiler is done, we should be able to drag our player, which we currently have inside here. We should be able to drag this one directly in our scene. Once again, if we are later instantiating the character on a position or put this somewhere, we can automatically fill in the data to the player manager by just doing everything in the respawn functionality. So we just call player manager and we say set our player to whatever the player is currently at. Nothing fancy at all, but the cool thing is now we can also read the data from this player manager. So we go back to our enemy behavior and scroll up a bit into the start function, where we're gonna have forgot to set up the target player. So we now can say target player is going to be equal to player manager dot instance dot, and now we're gonna have our player, and that's it. And since our player, the target player is of type transform, we need to say dot transform. Okay, there we go. Now when we're pressing play, we shouldn't have any null references anymore. Our little creature, our little Marin, or my little Marin, now is in idle mode. We are not close enough. And when we're now going inside the yellow circle, well, nothing happens. And it's nothing happening because we are not calling the MoveAttack function where we actually have commented this one out. So we're gonna pass into our, if the distance is smaller or equal the look radius, we're gonna call MoveAttack. Don't forget to save the script and return to Unity and test this one out once again. One thing to keep in mind, actually the enemy Marin, the game object, needs to be tagged enemy as well, otherwise our cursor script is not going to work correctly. Just to keep that in mind. Don't forget to save often, and let's play once again. Gonna go close to this guy, and what you can see is currently following us. Well, he is actually pretty fast. Also, he's not changing back its hopping animation. And the event the guy currently has on here, which I just created for Marin itself, or for its own, is just not on the object in here, I believe. So I'm gonna need to put this one onto this one. I believe that should be everything to fix my little problem in here about the hopping animation. Yep, that's just something I just forgot. And what you can see now, he keeps hopping, but we don't want him to keep hopping. We want to make sure that he's going back to idle when we are not close or we are not in range anymore. To do so, we just pass in an else statement where I just commented out update walking and say else open close curly brackets, and inside we're gonna say just walking is going to be equal to false. And that should be it. So now he's updating walking at the same time. or actually when the distance is higher than the look radius. So we're gonna keep sending in that we are not walking at that point and we are not doing anything because, well, yeah, walking is at that point just basically false. Nothing else in here is going to happen. Don't forget to save, and let's go back and check if everything is working correctly for now. There's another way to do that. We can also check for the passes itself, but with doing that with just that else statement makes it sure that he is instantly stopping when he's not seeing us anymore. Okay, and that's basically it. He's also attacking at the same time. As you can see, he is hitting me twice, which is not cool. We want to later on might go into that algorithm and change this so he's only doing the attack once, and maybe he is too far away, I don't know, 100%. Maybe we want to decrease the attack radius, but at the same time we also need to decrease the stopping distance, so he is actually going a bit closer and it might look a bit better. So this is up to whatever the current setup for this guy is going to be. My current attack radius is going to be 1.5. Maybe I'm gonna decrement or make this one a bit smaller to 1 maybe. But at the same time I need to take care of that his navigation mesh agent, that its stopping distance is maybe smaller than we want. Maybe about 1, so they're not biting each other and he's not able to reach him because of the stopping distance, for example. And that looks pretty good now. He's coming very close now, and of course this is looking way better now. So with a stopping distance of 1, he's going to attack us, and we are basically able to hit this guy at the same time. When we are double clicking him, we are also able to do our attack in here. Thanks for watching the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thumb this video up if you like it, and feel free to become my patron or donate by using PayPal to support me and my channel in the future. All links will be below in the description. See you in the next tutorial. Bye bye.